Masechet Yevamot Daf Pei Gimel. With this daf, we will complete the 8th perek of Masechet Yevamot. So we begin Amarav Leta Lematitin Mekame Baraita. Rav says that we should reject the Mishnah in favor of a Baraita. Well, what are we talking about? We're dealing with this last Mishnah of the perek and focusing on here. Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shimon, they both say that Androginos, who's a Kohen, who marries a Bat Yisrael, it can entitle her to eat terumah, which means that this Kohen himself is considered a man, he can eat terumah, and the marriage is considered valid, and so valid that he can even allow his wife to eat terumah. So according to this Mishnah, Rabbi Yosef and his colleague Rabbi Shimon consider androgynos to be 100% a male. The problem is that we have a baraita that contradicts it. Detanya, Rabbi Yosef omer androgynos b'dia b'fnei asmahu velo hichriu bo chachamim im zachar im nekeba. This baraita, which is also found in the Tosefta, by the way, teaches that according to Rabbi Yosef, androgynos is its own creature. It's not male, not female, but a third gender. And the rabbis did not decide regarding the applicable laws. Should we apply laws to him as if he's a male or the same as if he's a female, because he's this third gender altogether. This is interesting for a lot of reasons. One is that the idea of a male-female combined reminds us back in Bereshit, before when Adam was created, he was male and female together. And one Midrash says it was not his rib, but rather two sides. He was one side male, one side female, and then separated. So this is kind of a throwback to that. And this opinion may be in some way related to Greek ideas. It may be Greek medicine or even Greek mythology, where Plato recounts an ancient myth that before humans were created, there were these three different beings. One that were doubled. One was male, male. One was another was female, female, meaning two sides. And another was male, female. And then they were getting too powerful, and Zeus cut them in half. And so you have there three different types of beings there, and perhaps there's some connection. I don't know which way, but this requires more research. But certainly an interesting idea. Androgynos being its own gender. The point is, even if its own gender, it's still a safek. We don't know what it is, and therefore, if the androgynos would go and do kiddushin and marry a woman, we would have to worry. It might be good because maybe he's a male, but we would not allow her to eat terumah because maybe the androgynos is a female, and therefore the marriage is not. There is no marriage. And so we have to be machmir in all ways. So we see the Rabbi Yosef here contradicts himself in the Mishnah and the Baraita, and the Rav says we should cancel the Mishnah, not take away the Mishnah, and the Baraita is the correct one, which is interesting that we would prefer a Baraita over a Mishnah. So we ask, Baraita mikame matitin. Why don't we reject the Baraita in favor of the Mishnah? After all, the Mishnah is the authoritative work of oral law. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi put in everything that's going to be, solid and followed as halacha. So why would you do that? And the answer is because if you notice in the Mishnah you have two opinions, Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shimon. They both agree for sure androgynos is a man. But in the Baraita that we just quoted, it's only Rabbi Yosef. So how could that be? Where did Rabbi Shimon go? Oh, it must be that the Mishnah is the original, and in the original source, that's where Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shimon expressed their opinion. He's a male. But then Rabbi Yosef himself changed his mind, not Rabbi Shimon. And so he had an update. Oh, Rabbi Yosef says in the Baraita, which actually comes later, that he changed his mind. Because if this one came first, then if the Baraita came first, it should include Rabbi Shimon's opinion, whether he agrees or if he disagrees. It should say so as well. So that's Rav's opinion, that Rabbi Yosef changed his mind. And in fact, the bottom line, according to Rabbi Yosef, is that we do not know what an androgynos is, and so his wife cannot eat terumah. Shmuel says, no, I think the opposite. Let's cancel the Baraita and prefer the Mishnah, that according to Rabbi Yosef, androgynos is for sure a male. So we ask about him. Why'd you choose that way? Why don't you choose the other way and cancel the Mishnah in favor of the Baraita? And the answer is part of the question, rather. After all, we know that according to Shemuel, this Amora Shemuel is always worries, it takes into consideration minority opinion. we see that he does this in other cases, and so too here as well. Therefore, we should assume that Shemuel will cancel the Braita in favor of cancel the Mishnah in favor of the Braita, because in other cases he adds weight to a minority opinion, even if it's only in the Braita. So why do you say that he cancels the Braita? The answer is he'll only take into consideration a minority opinion in a Braita if it does not uproot the Mishnah. But if it uproots the Mishnah, then he won't. In other words, if a Mishnah says something, and then the Braita comes and adds another detail that is not included in the Mishnah does not talk about. So then, okay, add it in. It's a Braita. It's a good source. But if there's a contradiction and you can't do both, then he's always going to prefer the Mishnah and forget about the Braita. And so therefore, that's why he says, forget the Braita, and we're going to follow the Mishnah. All right, so that's the two opinions. It is quite an interesting machloket methodologically, because it seems they're also arguing about the order between the Mishnah and this Braita, which appears in the Tosefta. And there is a general question, which came first, the Mishnah or the Tosefta? Classically, most sages and scholars thought that the Mishnah comes first. Tosefta is literally additions, other Tannaitic opinions that didn't make it into the Mishnah, but are included in this later anthology. However, some rabbis and the more recent opinion of scholars is that Tosefta, in many cases, is actually the earlier material, the base material from which the Mishnah derives. And so actually the Tosefta comes first and Mishnah comes second. That would accord with Shemuel's opinion. Rav here said that the Mishnah came first, and at least in this case, the Tosefta comes later and updates it. Okay, so this is anyway related to that general methodological machloket. All right, now we have Amri be Rav Mishmeh de Rav. The house of Rav said in his name, meaning the school. So this Rav didn't say this himself, but Rav said this, but then they taught it in his school. We didn't. That's where we heard it from. We're going to identify Be Rav in a few minutes as Rav Huna, who was his primary student. So Be Rav doesn't necessarily mean a giant school, a big building. It could mean the primary student or students that studied with him. They said, Halacha kerebi Yosef be'androginos ubeharkava u'shmuel amar bekoshi ubekidush. So they said two things. Rav said that we follow the Yosef regarding androginos, and that would mean, see, Rav just said that Rabbi Yosef changed his mind, and now he follows the Baraita, which says that we're not sure what an androgynos is. That's one. And also regarding harkaba, grafting, we're going to see what that law is in a second. That was Rav. Shemuel said, we follow the opinion of Rabbi Yosef in the case of koshi, a woman who is in labor, and kiddush, when something becomes kilayim and prohibited, unfit to use. We're going to see all these cases exactly what they are. Okay, androgynos hadamaran. What's the case of androgynos? That's what we've been talking about this whole time. Where he's male, female. Can he get married? Does his wife eat teruma? So Rav says we should follow Rabbi Yosef and be safek. That was his bottom line anyway. Arkaba ditnan en not'in ve'en mabrichin ve'en markibin erev shevit pachot misheloshim yom lifnei Rosh Hashanah. Arkaba means grafting, taking two branches and putting them, attaching them to each other. So here's the halacha: you're not allowed to plant. This is all before Shavuot. You can't plant, or mavrich is you put a shoot of or a vine into the ground and back up, and then it takes root by itself, and then you cut it and it makes its own new tree. Or grafting, but on the year before Shavuot, meaning during the 6th year, you cannot do any of these things within 30 days of Rosh Hashanah. So even though the laws of Shavuot start from Rosh Hashanah, nevertheless we have to add more time beforehand, because each of these things they take time to take root, and therefore if you're going to plant them right before Rosh Hashanah, let's say one day before Rosh Hashanah, then they're going to actually take root on after Rosh Hashanah on Shavuot. So now you're preparing something that is going to violate Shavuot. So you have to wait at least 30 days. And if you did it b'di'avad, you have to uproot it, because you can't benefit from this violation of Shavuot. That's Tanakama. Rabbi Yosef Omer, Kol Arkaba Shena Koletet B'Shlosha Yamim Shu B'na Koletet. Rabbi Yosef Yehuda is more lenient, and he says any grafting that doesn't take a root in 3 days is never gonna take root. So regarding grafting, it takes just 3 days, and therefore, if you did it 4 days before, then it already will take root before Rosh Hashanah, and you're okay, because you're allowed to plant before Shavuot starts. You just can't do it when it starts. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon Omrim, Sheteh Shabbatot. Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shimon, notice you have both of these sages here. Also in the Mishnah, our Mishnah, it's both these sages together. In fact, all 4 of these cases are in Mishnayot, Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shimon together. So that's probably why the Rav and Shemuel said their statements about these particular statements of Rabbi Yosef. They probably have this in common also that he agrees with his colleague Rabbi Shimon. Okay, anyway, they say Sheteh Shabbatot. Their middle opinion says 2 weeks. You're not allowed to plant any of these things within 2 weeks of Rosh Hashanah. And saying this is halacha, we should follow that. Now, one clarification about this law is actually we have to add another 30 days beforehand for each of them. When we said 30, it doesn't mean 30 before, it means 30 and 30. The reason is just like on Shabbat, we have to add a few more minutes, Tosefta Shabbat, before sunset. You can't start Shabbat right at sunset. You have to add a few minutes. So too regarding the 7th year, you can't start right then. You have to add some time. How much time? 30 days. So 30 days is just a buffer zone. So therefore, you can't even plant anything within that 30 days. Therefore, you can't plant anything within 60 days because it'll take within 30 days to take root. So that's already not allowed. The opinion says 3 means 30 and 3. 33 days. And Rabbi Yosef, our opinion that we're following, says you need 2 weeks. Plus the 30 days. Very good. So that's the 2 opinions of Rav that we follow. Ushmuel Amar, Bekoshi Vikidush. So Shmuel says we follow Rabbi Yosef regarding these 2 things. Koshi, a woman in labor. Ditnan. Kama yehe kishuya. So this is regarding tum'ah. A woman seeing blood for various reasons has different laws. If a woman is in labor, she sees blood. What's the status of it? That's dam leda, and it will make her tameh for 7 days if it's a boy, 14 days if it's a girl. Blood that she sees after that, 7 or 14 days, is called dam tohar. So that's a special category of dam. If a woman, even if she's pregnant, if she sees blood during the pregnancy, then that is considered either dam nida or dam ziva. When if it's ziva, it would need 7 clean days in order for her to become tahor. Has a different law altogether. So now how do we know if a woman sees blood, is it called during pregnancy and therefore is nida or zava? Or do we consider it dam leda or dam yoledet? In which case it's considered something different. So how long before the 9 months? If it's at 9 months and going forward, just for sure that she's in labor. So any blood she sees is because of labor. But how long before the 9 months do we consider that? Oh, that's the beginning of labor. So various answers. Rabbi Meir Omer, o 40 or 50 yom, 40 or 50 days before her full term. That's already considered within labor. Maybe might go that early. It might start that early. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, daya chodsha. Rabbi Yehuda says no, 1 month. She explains here that it's not 1 month before labor, but rather the first Rosh Chodesh within her 9th month. From then on. So that Rosh Chodesh might be late in her last month, in which case it'll only be a few days. Or it might be early in the first month, in the last month, in which case it'll be longer. Okay. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon Omerim, and Kishu Yoter Misheteh Shabbatot. So Rabbi Yosef, that's what we want. They say that labor only begins 2 weeks before her due date. And therefore, that's it. That's the middle opinion, 2 weeks. And Shemuel says, we follow Rabbi Yosef in this case. Okay, good. Now, Kiddush. Kiddush usually means making something holy. But pentigdash is a word that's used regarding kilayim. Just like something kodesh is prohibited for most, so too kilayim is prohibited. Not in a positive way of being holy, but in a negative way. Still uses the same verb. So kiddush, we're talking about prohibition of kilayim. Ditnan, hamisakech kafno al gabe tibuato shel chavero harehu hareze kidesh. I take my vines, vines grow very long, and I take it and I pull it over the wheat, the grain of my friend in his yard. So this is a problem because you can't grow grain and grapes together. So by bringing my vines and putting it on top of his grain, I made his grain prohibited, kidesh, and I'm responsible for it. I have to pay him for ruining his grain because he can't use it anymore. That's they disagree and say, "En adam oseh davar she'eno shelo." They say, no, it's not a problem. If it was my grain and I put my vines over it, then I have a problem because I can prohibit my own. But I don't have the power to put my vines over that guy's grain and make his grain prohibited. That's a general principle. A person cannot prohibit something that he doesn't own. Okay, this principle does not apply all the time. For example, if I take my milk and I pour it on my friend's hamburger, and so that will prohibit it. So this does not apply across the board. But regarding things that require some intention, so it does apply. So anyway, they disagree with Rabbi Meir, and they say, I don't have to pay for it. It doesn't prohibit his grain, and therefore I don't have to pay for the grain. And Shmuel says we follow Rabbi Yosef, yes, in this case as well. Good. All right, we got all four cases, and now we're going to ask, what does the other sage think about each of these cases? So we know that Rav says we're going to follow the Yosef. What does Shemuel think regarding androgynos? And the answer is Tashema Damashmuel Rav Anan Le'eta Lebariata Mekame Matnitin. We already saw that Shemuel says we reject the Baraita and we uphold the Mishnah. The Mishnah says we consider him a full male. And therefore, that's Shemuel's opinion, whereas Rav, at least according to that, what we said earlier, he says that Rabbi Yosef's final answer is the Baraita, so Rav thinks that it's a Safek. If you look at Rashi here as an interesting take, that the school of Rav does not agree with the interpretation of Rav that we started with today. In other words, according to the school of Rav, who said these four statements, they're following what it says in the Mishnah exactly. In other words, we follow Rabbi Yosef in the Mishnah, that androgynos is a full male. In which case, actually, Rav and Shemuel would agree in this case. However, if we follow Rav as interpreted when we started today, according to which he thinks that Rav changed his mind and follows the Braita, then Rav and Shemuel would disagree on this case. Okay, next one, Harkava Mali Amar Shemuel. Regarding Harkava, that we saw, it's talking about 2 weeks before Shvi'it. That's when the deadline is for grafting. We know that Rav says we follow the Yosef. What would Shemuel say? Tashamat amar leShemuel Rav Anan taneh keman dama shelosha ushloshim. He does not say the Yosef, but rather he follows the more lenient opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says you just 3 days plus the 30. So he disagrees in that case too. Koshi mali amarav. Now regarding a woman in labor, we followed, Shemuel says we followed Rabbi Yosef. What would Rav say about that? Teko, we don't know. Rav never said anything about it. We don't know if he would agree or not. And finally, Kiddush mali amarav. Regarding the Kilayim case, where Shemuel says we followed Rabbi Yosef, who's more lenient and says that my vines will not prohibit my friend's grain, even if I put them on top of them. What does Rav think? Amar Rav Yosef tashemad, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav en halacha keRabbi Yosef. So we see here, Rav said, and quoted by Rav Huna, we do not follow Rabbi Yosef. So he disagrees here with Shemuel's opinion. Amar Labaye, my chazita samachtaha semochahad, Amar Rav Ada, Amar Rav halacha keRabbi Yosef. So we say, hold on, why do you rely on Rav Huna's tradition in the name of Rav? Why not follow Rav Ada's tradition in the name of Rav, who says halacha is like Rabbi Yosef in this case. We have to assume that together with the tradition, it wasn't just the words halacha Rabbi Yosef, but they remembered that it was about this case too. We have contradictory statements about what Rav said. Why are you following Rav Huna? Amre be Rav Manu, Rav Huna, Rav Huna Amar and halacha. So, because in general we say, who is the school of Rav? It's Rav Huna. So here you see that a school is not literally a big building with hundreds of students, but rather it means the primary student or students of a person. It's called his school. So since Rav Huna is the primary student, we follow his version of the tradition over that of Rav Ada. So as they see according to Rav, we do not follow Rabbi Yosef in the case of Kilayim. All right, very good. And now we go back to the Mishnah, which says that according to the Yehuda, tum, let's see what his opinion was. That means his privates are covered over, they're sunken in. But if we do surgery and we find that it's a zachar, then he cannot male. Then we cannot do chalitza because we consider that a seris. Right, even though yes, he's male, we see that he's fully a male, but he's not fertile, and therefore will not be able to do chalitza. Lo yachlitz, right? It sounds like if he's really not fertile, then his chalitza is going to be worth nothing. So if his brother dies without children, he should not do chalitza. Okay, let's see how we apply this. Amar Rabbi Ameh, my abid le Rabbi Yosef le tumtum debiri le deotbu abe kurse veikra veolid sheba benin. Question from an empirical source, right? There was a case of a tumtum in the town of Bidi, and they put him into this operation chair. Don't want to try to imagine what that was like. And they did the surgery, and they found. And he was a father. He was a man. And then after that, he had 7 boys. So you see that a tumtum, once we find out that he is male, he has a male organ, so he is fertile. Look at this guy. He had 7 kids. I don't believe it. Right? Maybe he says that they're his kids, but go check. Right? Go see if his wife was ever with anybody else, and he would bet that the father was actually not him. Okay, that's how much he trusted his halacha and his science that this case he does not believe. All right, so there you go. According to the Yehuda, for sure Tumtum is out. Cannot father children, and therefore cannot do yibum, cannot do chalitza. Tanya Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda Omer. And now we have a tradition from Rabbi Yehuda's son, Rabbi Yosef, who has a different opinion. He says, Tumtum lo yachalos, shemma yikara v'nimsa seris hama. Tumtum, as he is, cannot do chalitza, because perhaps if we open him up and do surgery, we will find that he is a eunuch. He is not fertile, meaning only perhaps he's not fertile. Rabbi Yosef said it as a for sure. Now we ask about this just to clarify. Wait, and if you do surgery, how do you know if he's going to be a male? Maybe he's going to be a female. So why assume he's going to be a male and fertile? Maybe he's female and whatever. This is what I meant to say. It says we don't know what this tumtum is. It could be if you open him up, he's going to be a female, in which case obviously cannot do yibum and chalitza. And even if it's a male, maybe the male is not fertile. Maybe he is fertile, but maybe not. So you see, it's a double safek that he's no good, but he's not a for sure no good. So Rabbi Yosef left some doubt that perhaps a tumtum can have children. Okay, so that's a machloka between father and son regarding can they have children, which is interesting. Okay, my benai, what will be a practical difference between them? Amar avad lifsol bimkom achin. What if there are other brothers? So someone dies without children, and he leaves behind a tumtum brother and another healthy brother. Now, the tumtum goes and does chalitza. Usually, if someone does chalitza, that cancels out the right of the other brothers to do anything, to do yibum. So what would be in this case if a tumtum did it? If he is for sure not fertile, then his chalitza is worth nothing. So therefore, another brother can go and do yibum. That would be according to Rabbi Yehuda. Right. And according to Rabbi Yosef, his son, who says, well, maybe it's okay. Therefore, if the tutum does chalitza, perhaps it's a good chalitza, and therefore the brother would be out, and the brother cannot do yibum. That will be one difference. And also, what if there are no other brothers? Does the tumtum, there's only a tumtum brother, that's a yavam, does he have to even do chalitza? According to the Yehuda, he's for sure no good, for sure not able to have children, and therefore she can just go free and marry anyone. She can marry a kohen if she wants. Whereas according to Rabbi Yosef, it could be that he is required to do yibum or chalitza. Therefore, he must do chalitza before she would be allowed to go out, and she would be considered a chalusa and prohibited to a kohen afterwards. Good. Amar Rav Shemuel bar Yehuda Amar Rabbi Abba Achud Rabbi Yehuda bar Zavdi Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Okay, a long chain of tradition, all going back to Rav, the first generation Babylonian. Androgynos hayavin alav sikila mishete mekomot. Okay, going back to the topic that we ended yesterday with, androgynos will be liable to sikila if he has relations with a man, and whether through either of his orifices, either biashelo kedarka or through the androgynos' female orifice. Yes, androgynos is two. Has two male and female sign. So either through his female sign or biashelo kedarka from the back. Both ways are prohibited as mishkav zachur. Okay, that's what Rav says. Now challenge. Metibe Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Androgynos chayvin aval sikila ki bezachar. Our Mishnah says androgynos is liable sikila like a male. What do you mean like a male? He'll only be liable if he has relations in his male orifice. Meaning in his backside. But in the androgynos' female orifice, no, patur, that's not called mishkav zachur, has to be like a normal case of mishkav zachur. Okay, that's Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, hu damar ki hay tana. So now Rav, this is a challenge to Rav. How could Rav say both ways when our Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer, says only one way? So the answer is Rav follows another Tana, the Tanya, the Bisimai. He follows the Bisimai. Omer, androgynos chayvin alav sikila mishete mekomot. There you go. Androgynos can be liable in two ways. My Tamad the Bisimai. Now, what's the biblical source for the Bisimai, who says two ways? Amarava bar Hameduri azberali. So Rava says, this man bar Hamduri explained it to me. The pasuk says, ve'et zachar lo tishkab mishkebe isha to'ebahu. So since it says mishkebe isha, that's plural, right? A man may not lie, the lyings of a woman. So ezu zachar shesh bo shete mishkabot, have omer ze androgynos. That's a strange thing to say. Regarding a woman, we know that there are two ways to have prohibited relations with a woman. But with the man, there's only one. So what's this pasuk talking about? Why would it say with the man, you're not allowed the lyings of a woman, the two ways? So what's this pasuk talking about? Where is there ever a man that has two ways of having intercourse? It must be androgynos. There you go. So according to him, this whole pasuk is talking about androgynos, and therefore both are prohibited biblically, and therefore both will be chayav sekila. All right. Now Rabbanan is actually only to be Eliezer, but since halacha is going to follow him, we call him Rabbanan. So Rabbanan, who say only one way, what do they do with this pasuk? Okay, it's true. It says two mishkabot, but also says ve'et zachar. And those words ve'et zachar mean, they agree that this pasuk is talking about androgynos, but it says the androgynos is only liable like a zachar would be, which is only one out of the two ways that a woman could have intercourse. Okay, Rabbanan. Now, further question on Rabbi Eliezer. Zachar gereda minalehu. If once you take this pasuk against the peshat and say it's not talking about a male, but rather talking about androgynos, so how do we know the prohibition for about a male to be with a male? So that is going to be from me isha. This doesn't make any sense, and in fact, all the manuscripts have something different. I'll show you them here. Here we have me isha in the printed edition, but even the other printed editions and all the manuscripts say minalan from ve'et. Okay, so that's the correct reading. Let's go back to the pasuk and see. It's coming from here, ve'et zachar lo tishkav, right? So that extra word in the beginning, ve'et, so it says, also male, therefore male and androgynos. Both are, that's the origin of that prohibition. Okay, Beisha shelo kedarka minalehu. Okay, fine. Now, how do we know that regarding intercourse with the woman, that there are two ways of it being prohibited and punishable if it's any case that is illicit relation? So how do we know that? So the answer is from the extra word ve'isha. Now, this text is also problematic because we don't have any ve'isha, at least not in this pasuk. And if we look at the manuscripts, it says mina lehu me. Only the Vilna has ve'isha. All the rest has me isha. That's it, just from the word isha. So in other words, going back to the pasuk, you could have said lo tishka mishkebe, period. Why say mishkebe isha? So from that extra word, we learn that regarding a woman, there are two ways to have an act that is considered bi'ah, and that would be prohibited if it was a prohibited relation. Okay, so that's how they deal with the Pesukim. And last section, Amarav Shizbi Amarav Chista. Lo lakol amar Rabbi Eliezer androgynos sachar ma'al yahu, shimata omer ken v'muktashin yikdash. So even though here we're following Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Eliezer says androgynos is considered a male, not true for all cases. We know that Rabbi Eliezer thinks it has to be a male, that the androgynos is considered a male, because after all, he says that you give him capital punishment for violating. So therefore, it must be that he considers him for sure zachar, a male. But that's only true in this case here, but not in all cases. In this case, it's regarding humans. And the case where we're going to see an exception is regarding animals or birds. If you make it hekdesh, if you say this animal is going to be a sacrifice, and it's a sacrifice, it has to be a male animal, and you make it, you say this is going to be, I'm designated as a sacrifice, is it considered kodesh? And the answer is, if the animal itself is an androgynos animal, then it is not kodesh. We do not consider it for sure a male. That's what we're going to see in the following baraita. So, minalan de lo kadash, how do we know that according to the Eliezer, it will not become kodesh? Tetanu banan. Hanirba, v'hamukse, v'hanebad, v'hatnan, umchir, v'tumtum, v'androgynos, metamein, begadim, abet habeli'ah. This is talking about so far birds, and it says a bird that is violated by a human, or it's set aside for avodah zarah, or it's actually worshipped as avodah zarah, or it's given in payment for for zenut, for zonah, a female or male. And tumtum, if the bird itself is a tumtum, or the bird is androgynos, and you do milika. Now, milika is a way of doing slaughtering it that's special, used only for it as a bird that is a korban. So then it's kosher and can be eaten by the kohanim. But if it's not a valid korban and you do milika, then it becomes a nevela. And nevela causes tum'ah. Birds have a special way of making someone tameh, not by touching, but a nevela bird only makes someone tameh when he eats it. So any of these things, if one did milika and then ate it, so once it goes down his throat, that will make the person tameh. It also makes garments impure. Okay, so that's all Tanakama, and you see already here that the bird is androgynos is not considered a male bird. Rabbi Eliezer disagrees regarding birds, but he does agree regarding animals. That's going to be our proof. He says, I disagree with regarding birds, and a bird that's tumtum androgynos do not cause tumah. In other words, it's a valid korban, and so it's not a nevela. Says anytime the Torah talks about something in terms of it being male or female, then the tumtum androgynos are excluded. They're not male, not female, no good. But a bird is never referred to as being a male bird or female bird, and therefore we can include tumtum androgynos as being the same category as whatever other bird. So therefore, he thinks you can sacrifice an androgynous bird. Based on this reasoning, when it comes to an animal where the Torah does talk about them as male and female, androgynous animal would be not considered a male, and so if you tried to make it sacrifice, this androgynous is going to be like a male and sacrificed. No, sorry, it does not become kodesh because it's not in the category of being male. It's androgynous. So you see, Rabbi Eliezer, it's true when it comes to humans, considers androgynous a male, but not when it comes to animals. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak afanen name tenena. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak agrees and says, I have a braita that supports it. Rabbi Eliezer omer hakil'ayim utrefa ve'yoseh dofen tumtum v'androgynos lo kedoshin ve'lo makdishin. According to this braita, we have Rabbi Eliezer says explicitly that something that's kilayim, an animal that you mixed breed, is prohibited, or an animal that's terefa, it's sick, it's not gonna live long, or if the animal is born with a cesarean section, or the animal is tentum or androgynos, it cannot become sacred as a sacrifice. And furthermore, it will not is not sacred and will not make something else sacred. What is that referring to? That's referring to the law of timurah. In general, if you have an animal that's kodesh and you say, you know what, I don't want to bring this animal, I changed my mind, I want to transfer its kedusha to animal B. The law is that both A and B are both become kodesh, because we don't want you switching from a more expensive animal. When you're in the mood, I'm going to give this expensive animal. Then you say, a little lesser animal, and therefore the halacha is even if it's a lesser to a greater animal, not allowed. If you try to make one switch it, both will be kodesh. That's true in general regarding an animal that can be kodesh. But if you have an androgynous animal, it will not become sacred by way of substitution. In other words, if you had an animal that is in fact kodesh, and you say, instead of this one, I'm going to bring the androgynous. The second one, the androgynous, does not become kodesh. Velo makdishin, and it does not render another animal sacred. If I have this one animal that's androgynous, and I say this is kodesh, and I say I change my mind for the other one also does not become kodesh. Since there's no kodesh to begin with, there's nothing to transfer. So we see that this supports the fact that Rabbi Eliezer says androgynous is a male by humans, but not by animals. All right, and last story. Rabbi Eliezer omer chayavin alav sikila kezachar. That statement that's attached to the end of the Mishnah has its own story. Tanya. Amar Rabbi, keshalachti l'mod Torah es Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. Rabbi, that's Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who composed the Mishnah. One time, he went to Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua to learn Torah from him. But his students were very overprotective of their rabbi. Havru alai talmidav ketan golim shel bet bukya velo nichuni l'mod ela davar echad b'mishnatenu. The students were ganged up on me like roosters. If you ever see roosters on the Nature Channel, one comes into the domain of the other and they fiercely attack each other. Right? This is my area, my turf. You cannot come here. So too, we're comparing the students of Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua says, oh, what are you doing here to be? You're trying to take over. You're trying to impose your opinion. They would not let me learn except one thing. While I was there, I was able to get out of it. And that is this law that's in our Mishnah, which is Rabbi Eliezer omer, androgynous chayavin alav sikila kezachar. I managed to learn this one thing, and I guess after that, Rabbi knew it, and he included it in this Mishnah. So, this last phrase of our Mishnah took a lot of misirut nefesh on the account of Rabbi to go and get this. He had to get beat up in order to derive this one law, so we can appreciate it all the more. Hadran arach he'adel chazakim u'beruchim.